thank you very much. We're going to go ahead and get started with our afternoon informational briefings. First up, we have the Department of Land and Natural Resources. Cardi, you're the interim chairperson for DLNR right now. If you want to go ahead and begin.
Sure. Aloha and good afternoon. Chair Tokuda, Chair Luke, Vice Chair Koichi, and Vice Chair Nishimoto, and members of both committees. Cardi Chang, Acting Chairperson for the Department of Land and Natural Resources. The Department's mission is to enhance, protect, conserve, and manage Hawaii's unique and limited natural, cultural, and historic resources held in public trust for current and future generations. We accomplish this by working collaboratively and in partnership with federal agencies, the private sector, counties, and other state agencies. DLNR is tasked with vast responsibilities of managing these resources in the best interest of the public. We manage 1.3 million acres of land comprised of sensitive, natural, cultural, and recreational resources. These lands include managing and maintaining our forest lands, trails, protection of endangered species, state parks and other recreational areas, small boat harbors, ramps, coastal lands, sandy beaches, historical and cultural sites, as well as issuing, managing leases on public lands. We also manage millions of acres of state ocean waters, and these waters extend 3 miles out seaward from the shoreline. They include both submerged lands as well as the resources that are in these waters, such as coral reefs, as well as the fish. Our job is also to ensure sustainability of our groundwater resources, as well as making sure that there's sufficient quantity of stream flows. We also have public safety responsibilities. For example, we regulate dams and reservoirs, we implement rockfall mitigation projects, flood prevention projects, as well as firefighting efforts. We also play a role in controlling invasive species, and we also have a regulatory role as well, and we regulate activity within the conservation district. The conservation district involves about 3 million acres, submerged lands, as well as terrestrial lands. We understand that Hawaii's economy is primarily driven by a visitor industry. Visitors and residents come to Hawaii to expect and enjoy the natural beauty that which is Hawaii's really greatest assets. Our job is to ensure that these assets are not only beautiful, but sustainable for generations to come. Visitors and residents alike want the opportunity to appreciate the unique features and sense of place that only Hawaii has to offer. It would be detrimental to our state economy and the people of Hawaii to allow the degradation of our precious resources. I'm going to talk a little bit about economic conditions and what the department is doing to address the current fiscal situation. The department recognizes that although economic conditions have improved, I think we all seen the Council on Revenue's projections, we understand the state is far from being out of the woods. And the department has made significant strides to address this, to become more efficient and self-sufficient. We're doing this by changing the way we do things, becoming more efficient in-house, generating additional revenues, and try to utilize our own revenues and federal funds as much as possible instead of solely relying on the general funds. In light of this, we also recognize that not all departmental functions can be funded with special funds or federal funds, and still must rely on general funds for support where special or federal funds cannot be utilized. Budget reductions over the last 5 to 10 years have severely impacted staffing, operations, and including our ability to perform our core functions, such as enforcement, resource management, regulatory oversight, fiscal and personal management, and providing recreational opportunities to the public. I'll talk a little bit about federal funds. The department receives a lot of federal funds, and much of this is illustrated in Table 11 in the testimony. But what I'm going to really focus on in this section is, I think the question that was posed was, what are DLNR programs that have lost or at risk of losing federal grants through federal sequestration or some other reason? And I want to highlight 3 areas. Positions that are currently federally funded are the co-manager for the Hawaiian Islands Humpback Whale National Marine Sanctuary, the co-manager for the Papahanaumokuakea Marine National Monument, and currently they receive funding from NOAA. However, both programs had the federal funds cut by approximately 60 to 70%. So both programs are important to ensure that the state has an equal seat at the table when it comes to representing these areas, along with the federal government, and ensuring that equal decision-making authority on how these particular areas are managed. Another area is the State Historic Preservation Division, who receives funds from the National Park Service. I think we're all aware that there was a point in time it was unclear if SHPD was meeting its federally mandated functions. And we acknowledge full responsibility and are pleased to say that we have made significant progress in meeting the requirements of the National Park Service Corrective Action Plan. This action plan, satisfying the obligations of this corrective action plan required by federal law to avoid losing these federal funds. We're almost there. We've satisfied the majority of the requirements in the corrective action plan to allow SHPD to be removed from high-risk status. We anticipate that happening within the next couple years. Although, if you look at the current budget, there's no request right now for these particular positions. We are currently in discussion with the administration, and there may be a potential governor's message that will come down to add funds, but right now there's nothing in the current budget to address this potential federal fund shortfall. A little bit about the methodology of the budget process. As I mentioned earlier, the department recognizes that general funds are limited and there are many competing statewide priorities. So our budget was based on minimizing the general fund ask to those programs, although housed in DLNR, really had a statewide benefit. We also tried to include funding for projects that have already been started or ongoing and will make our operations more efficient, as well as create easier access and transparency for the public. The department further recognizes that if we are to effectively reform our core functions, additional funds are necessary. Therefore, we are currently in discussion with the administration, which may result in additional funding requests through a governor's message, but we haven't gotten any indication of what those requests may be yet. In summary, the current budget that you have in front of you, we're requesting for $75,000 in general funds in fiscal year 16, expenditure ceiling of $4.9 million in special funds increase, and in fiscal year 17, $75,000 in general funds, and an increase in expenditure ceiling special funds of $4.2 million. I'm just going to highlight a few of our asks that are currently in the budget. For Land Division, LNR 101, this is a special fund request, and this is to reauthorize a special fund ceiling to redesign and upgrade the state lands informational management system, or what we call SLIMS. What happened with this project was that the legislature in 2015 authorized spending of $1.3 million. However, $300,000 of that $1 million is going to be encumbered by June 30th of this year. The $300,000 is going to be used for the planning and coming up with the specifications to be issued through a request for proposal. So what we need to do is that $1 million that was previously authorized, we need to shift that $1 million to for implementation into fiscal year 16. So it's just a moving of that $1 million authorization ceiling to fiscal year 16. Bureau Conveyance, which is LNR 111. This is an ongoing effort that was started a while back to digitize all the microfilmed archives of recorded documents and improving electronic access to all functions in the Bureau. The benefit of this project is that it not only makes it more easily retrievable, but it allows the public a lot greater access to these documents because they can access them online instead of having to come to the office, sit there and pay for these films. So this is just an ongoing effort. We're requesting for expenditure ceiling of $250,000 in fiscal year 16 and expenditure ceiling increase of $500,000 in fiscal year 17. For all non-general fund accounts or funds, there's been a new fringe benefit rate of 52%. So all of our non-general fund program IDs are going to need this expenditure ceiling increase. For LNR 153, 401, and 805, this is our Aquatic Resources Division. They're currently proposing a reorganization. However, this reorganization does not require funding. We need to come to the legislature because what we're doing in this reorganization is we're updating functional statements, reclassifying certain positions to maximize the effectiveness of personnel and productivity. And the reason why the legislative approval is needed is because this involves a number of position or staff transfer from one LNR to another LNR. So program ID changes require legislative approval. Our admin, which is LNR 906, this is our only general fund request, is for our statewide sustainability coordinator. And the purpose of this position is to coordinate interagency and partnership initiatives in support of the goals and the principles outlined in Act 181, Session Laws of Hawaii 2011. And that particular law establishes sustainability as a state priority. In addition to that, this position also serves as the government lead for the Aloha Plus Challenge, which was unanimously endorsed by the 2014 legislature. This position works across state departments to break down silos, while also working closely with the counties, OHA, federal agencies, and other stakeholders to leverage funding for a more strategic, integrated, and cost-effective approach to implementation. Okay. Lastly, I'm going to talk a little bit about CIP, but in general terms, in fiscal year 16, we're requesting for $19 million in CIP. Fiscal year 17, we're requesting for $19.5 million, and the breakdown of those particular numbers are on table 22. And actually, I kind of wanted to keep it brief, so we'll allow questions. So that concludes the overview. If you have questions on any particular table, you know, all of the administrators are here, the program managers are here, and we're available to answer any questions you may have. Thank you.
Thank you. Members, questions? Senator Inouye?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Aloha. Thank you. My question is with regards to what you just talked about with regards to the state sustainability coordinator position. I wasn't here when that was passed, and I understand hearing you, Act 181 is relating to sustainability. I'm just reporting to you or asking you, does this have to do with how you manage state lands and with regards to leases? Is that part of the efficiency of what you're trying to accomplish as well with this coordinator's position? Because you're saying it's related to sustainability. Question is, it's come up with many of my constituents, and I think I've heard it elsewhere as well, that the department, and this is what I'm hearing now, the department is now banking on looking at those land leases that are to expire or in renegotiations, and that the department is looking at supporting its efforts and to survive, penalizing those leases and increasing it to at least some of the leases I've heard to 200%. And you're talking about agriculture lands in particular because that's the largest group that has been complaining. Just some of your comments. And I understand seriously that you have somebody working in there, and I don't know if it's an attorney that's in the position now, but looking at, I guess, in the reorganization. But what we're saying is that don't survive on the backs of agriculture is what they're saying, and that's what I'm saying as well. So your comments, please.
Well, I think the sustainability coordinator position and land leases are sort of separate issues, and I can offer our sustainability coordinator is here today. It might be good to hear from her on what she's tasked with, so you know what she's not tasked with. Is Jackie here? Why don't you explain? I don't think it's Related to the land use, that's a separate issue that land division can address.
Aloha. So I'm Jackie Kozak-Teal. I'm the sustainability coordinator based at DLNR, and I actually haven't worked on the lease issue at all. I'm more focused on, so it mentions Act 181, and then more recently, following on the great leadership of the legislature last year, unanimously endorsing the Aloha Plus Challenge. So really specifically looking at our clean energy goals, our local food production, so that is where I relate to agriculture, solid waste reduction, natural resource management, smart growth, climate resilience, green jobs, and education. So the overarching kind of holistic approach to sustainability, and really that integration is working across the departments and really closely with our counties and community partners. So I don't work specifically on the land leases.
Then maybe the chair can answer this with regards to the land management division then, whoever's working on lease lands.
I'm going to have to defer that. I don't have enough information on that, but Russell Suji, our land administrator, can comment.
Thank you.
Yes, good afternoon, Russell Tsuji, the Land Division Administrator. As far as the leases and the rents, they're established and set by statute and basically saying by appraisal at fair market value. The appraisals obviously are set, a lot of these leases are set for 10 years and then get reappraised or reopened. And after about a 10-year period, the markets tend to have gone up. And I think what a lot of these lessees are seeing is that the rates have gone up, or the fair market value have gone up. They do have an option of the arbitration, and in fact, last year, the legislature passed an amendment to the arbitration statute to allow for mediation as a potential. And we've, in fact, just went through, that was passed, effective July 1. My assistant administrator and myself went through our very first mediation already, just recently, and that was with respect to the ocean cage out at Keahole. And we were able to resolve that matter, and we'll be making a recommendation to settle that matter before the land board by mediation.
I'll have more questions, but I think I can deal with that later on when the Ways and Means and the Senate side looks at the different agencies. So, Madam Chair, I'll refrain from any more questions at this time. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Members, questions? Did you have any questions? Okay, members? Maybe, Cardi. We had a busy morning today. I think we used up all of our questions then. Just a couple of questions. I know you had a few budget requests that I don't believe has, I know you're going to be going before the administration shortly to make some requests and then I guess get some prioritizations and then be coming back to us with potential governor's messages. But thank you for at least putting them down in terms of giving us an indication of what those potential requests might be. That's very helpful for the committees to actually just have that in writing. But just a few questions. You have down in here LNR 802, I think that's for SHPD, requesting 17 positions, $434,000 roughly. $435,000. For that LNR 802 request, is that required for compliance for the corrective action plan for SHPD, or is that in addition to the corrective action plan?
Alan Downer is our SHPD coordinator, SHPD administrator. He's here today. He can answer that.
And maybe when he comes up here, I know that for the corrective action plan, we're just missing two pieces of it. What are those two parts? And are we going to have to provide any funding or FTEs for those in order to come into compliance with those two additional portions of the corrective action plan?
Okay. Good afternoon. I'm Alan Downer, SHPD Administrator. Well, let me answer the second question first. The two pieces that remain to be completed for the corrective action plan is the audit. The audit is the draft reports are coming in. We got the first one on Monday. We expect the other three next week. So once we respond to that, that part of the audit is done. We're also part of the state's 2014 single audit. We're one of the agencies being tested as part of that. So there's no additional funding required for that. The second piece that remains to be completed is the Park Service did not accept our data management plan. We're revising that. We did tell them when we told them that we were in the process of revising it that implementation of that data management plan is going to require additional funds. As far as the additional personnel requested, a couple of those positions are necessary for the corrective action plan, but most of those are simply a matter of addressing the real operational needs of the division.
Okay. So the additional funds that will be required for the data management plan, when do you anticipate needing those particular funds, and do you have an estimate of what those costs might be?
Well, we think the complete implementation is going to be between $800,000 and $1 million. And obviously, the Park Service has not said you must implement this year. They simply said, "Where's your plan?" They did not accept the plan. Obviously, the sooner we can get that done, the better. Pardon me. Right now, all of our data is in paper form. We've got 3.5 million pages of documents in our files. Planners need access to that. Consultants need access to that, and frankly, the staff does for review and compliance purposes. And it is very difficult to work with that stuff in all of our files.
Okay, so I know that there's a few pages in Table 4 of requested budget decisions. Is that one of the requests that's going to be going before the governor? Or?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Thank you. A non-shifty question. Another right below that you have LNR 405. So that's DoCare's budget. There's a request for $2 million additional funds for DoCare for restoration of their personal services, current expenses, equipment, motor vehicles. Just a quick question. I'm not sure if that's specifically for going towards some of the FTEs, but I did notice that you have 35 DoCare vacancies that are budgeted and authorized to hire. So, I do know there's always issues when we come here about wanting to make sure DoCare is properly staffed and that you have the enforcement support that you need to be able to do the work that you do. One, how are we doing in terms of making sure that we actually fill those 35 DoCare vacancies since they are budgeted? And you have the authorization to hire them, but if you have the budget and the authorization to hire them and you're coming in for an additional $2 million for DoCare, what specifically on top of that authorization and bodies is that $2 million for? Specifically, is this for additional bodies? Is this for equipment? Is this for operational support?
Well, the $2 million request is purely for other expenses. But as far as your question on where we are now, it sounds like you want an indication of where we're going with the vacancies. Randy Awo has retired as of December. However, we have someone, Jason Redula, who's acting in his place. And I think we had a discussion about this the other day. Jason, you want to kind of explain where we are now?
Yes, good afternoon, Madam Chair, members of the committee. Jason Redula, Acting Enforcement Chief. With regards to our vacancies, yes, we do have approximately 35 vacancies in the division right now. All of these vacancies have requests put in. They are within the recruitment process right now in various stages. We are in the process of hiring personnel and in various stages of recruiting. With regards to the $2 million requests, some of that is a request for funding for our startup costs. When we hire employees, there are various costs relating to equipping, training, and outfitting them properly for field work. In addition to that, we're requiring additional funding in order to properly fund the maintenance costs of our aging vehicle and vessel fleet, and furthermore to provide additional operational support for various types of law enforcement operations we have statewide, many of which are not reimbursable.
Okay. Maybe if you could provide that breakdown to the committee so that we can see the breakdown of that $2 million request as well, that would be helpful.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. And then Cardi, I also did notice that further down there, and I know this is not in priority order, but you had changing the method of funding from federal to general for the Northwest Hawaiian Islands Monument grant. It looks almost like trying to bring in some state match to the federal funding that currently is coming in for that particular program, or at least trying to put in $375,000 worth of state funding. Currently, I think right now it's purely federally funded, right? Is that my understanding for that particular?
And that's what I kind of indicated in that section of the narrative about which programs may potentially lose federal funding. So currently, the NOAA funds that are currently being used have been severely cut over the years, and we anticipate that we may not even get federal funds. So the conversion of these two positions that are currently funded by NOAA, we would request, we're identified them as being switched from federal funds to general funds, not to match, but to replace the funding that potentially may be lost.
So the 375 reflects a total replacement of the federal funds.
The current request of 375 includes the co-manager for the Humpback Whale Sanctuary, the co-manager of the Papahanaumokuakea position, a permit coordinator, as well as other expenses that they would need outside of the payroll.
So when would we know whether or not we'd be getting any federal funds for these particular?
I think both programs are a little bit different, so we have both co-managers here, and they can kind of talk a little bit about their area of responsibility, and you guys would have that. Okay.
Hi, Aaliyah Herman. I'm the state co-manager of the Humpback Whale Sanctuary. So for the sanctuary, and then my colleague Maria Carnevale will speak about the monument, we've been federally funded since 1998 on the order of about $225,000 a year. And that amount has been cut precipitously. So for example, this year we received $75,000, which isn't even enough to fund a single position at the state for a full year. So that will expire in July. Each year, this has come up annually, so every year it's a question mark of whether or not we will get any funds or how much. In the past, it's been kind of a given that we would get funds, but because of sequestration and other factors that have changed, that's no longer the reality. And so, I'll say with the sanctuary, right now, it's going through a management plan review process, and NOAA in the next month is going to be proposing a sanctuary that will now look to manage all of the natural and cultural resources within its boundaries, which includes over 30% of state waters in the main Hawaiian Islands. And clearly, based on what's been happening with the budget, we can no longer rely on NOAA to ensure the state has a seat at that table. So we will likely find out, this has been on the federal fiscal year, probably in maybe summertime, maybe a little bit sooner if we get any money, but guaranteed it won't be enough for a full year. And it's not a long-term solution. And I think, probably never before has it been more important that the state ensures that there's a seat at the table. So, at a minimum, these co-manager positions are critical, and federal funds aren't cutting it anymore. And then I'll turn this over to my colleague to talk about the monument.
Hi, aloha. I'm Maria Carnevale. I'm the state co-manager for Papahanaumokuakea Marine National Monument. Historically, we've received on average about $300,000 a year for funding from NOAA. This included both my position as co-manager and then 3 support positions. As of right now, with the downward trend as a result of sequestration, we received $76,000 this year. We were normally funded on a federal fiscal year cycle, but this year's monies actually only last through June 30th for our program. So normally in the spring, we're renegotiating for the next fiscal year, the federal fiscal year's worth of funds. But as of this year, it's extremely uncertain in terms of financial stability for these positions. Thank you.
Thank you. Members, questions? President Tokioka?
Thank you, Chair. I have a follow-up question on the NOAA and the Papahanaumokuakea grants. So, how long were we receiving $250,000 in NOAA and 300,000 at the Northwest Hawaiian Islands? How many years were we receiving that kind of money?
For the Northwesterns, I started tracking budgets with the designation, though there was a small amounts of funds that helped in the planning phase to go for the designation of the monument, and we were designated in 2006. So in upwards at our highest yearly funding levels, we were at around $350,000 or $60,000 each year.
And is that the same for NOAA as well?
So for the sanctuary, we've been receiving federal funds since 1998. I have a graph I'd be happy to share. We actually, we received over $500,000 one year, but again, on average, it's been about 225, and then it was 75 this last year.
Okay, and so it's my understanding that the state is co-managers along with the federal government, and the theory has been it's 50-50 state and federal. So now that the federal government is not living up to their portion of it, now what? How does that agreement work? Because there are some people in the community that don't think we need the humpback whale sanctuaries anymore. And I know you folks have lived through that, so.
Certainly. That's certainly a big policy question.
By who, though? Because now if it's supposed to be 50-50 and they're not funding it, are we funding it at that levels? Or
yeah, sure.
And if we are, then we should have a bigger say as a state, right?
Understood. So in 1998 is also when we established the compact agreement, which designated the sanctuary as a co-managed entity, so where both parts would work as equal partners. Now that's in the policy element. It's never been 50-50 in terms of fund or staff, or also, frankly, ownership of resources. So NOAA has always had significantly more staff, upwards of 20 as compared to 1, 2, or 3 on the state, and all of the funding has been federal. The state has never put in any money. From a policy perspective, these are state waters, and at the end of the day, the sanctuary only continues to exist in state waters because the governor says so. So I think where co-management gets complicated is there's different pieces to the puzzle, and we have different control over different parts. But I think to properly exercise our part, especially this policy piece, to make decisions about policy, regulations, even just the education, outreach, restoration activities that we do, we have to have that seat at the table. NOAA has paid for us to have that seat at the table. We can't rely on that anymore. So if we want to make sure we continue to have that active voice, particularly as this plan comes out in the next month, and there'll be public meetings and public hearings, we need to ensure that at a minimum we have a state co-manager. And part of the funds you'll see in there as well is also for operations, because it's hard to do your job without that as well. Right. And I'd be happy to talk in more detail and sit down with you about all this, because I know we've talked about it before.
On Kauai, we've had a lot of meetings with the groups, NOAA and others, and the players change, and there's a lot of frustration from residents throughout the state, and especially on the island that I represent, as far as the communication of the meetings, because they show up for one thing and it's something else. And I know that's not a budgetary question, but the educational part of it is certainly something that we can do better, whether it's through NOAA grants or through the state grants. So
I completely agree with that, and anything we can do to help, because it is very confusing. NOAA proposes a lot of different things under a lot of different authorities, and if there's ways that we can help make that more clear and transparent in terms of doing better education, even from the state, even though it's no actions from the state side, happy to work with you to do whatever we can to make that run more smoothly.
Yeah, but just being aware of that is a good starting point. So
yes, absolutely.
I'm not sure if you wanted to add to the discussion as far as Papahānaumoku.
Sure. I'll just add that there's a difference in the governance structures for both the monument and the sanctuary, and so for the state, in conjunction with NOAA and Fish and Wildlife and the Office of Hawaiian Affairs, we're run day to day by a 7-agency management board with a senior executive board that sits above us to help with policy decisions at the national level. So it's just a little slightly different, and I can offer more detail, but it sounds like you were more asking about Kauai and the humpback whale sanctuary. Just to add.
A lot of Kauai fishermen have concerns about or issues with some of the regulations that relate to Papahānaumoku. Thank you. Mm-hmm. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Senator Inouye?
Thank you. I'd like to know on your DLNR, your prioritized list of functions with regards to LNR 172, managing the forest lands. You mentioned that you're going to license, or is it an ongoing thing, a timber mill on the Big Island for production and export of tropical hardwoods?
Sherry Mann is here from Forestry, can answer that.
Thank you, and where it is.
Good afternoon. My name is Sherry Mann. I'm the Forestry Program Manager for the state. I think what you're referring to is Waiakea Timber. It's in sort of upper Hilo area. There's about 12,000 acres that are currently in timber stands. There's a variety of species. Over the past 20 years, we've been trying to get it into a license agreement that would harvest and replant over time. There's been a number of failures in that for a variety of reasons. So what we have done is we're just finishing, we're still in the process, we're very close to finishing the environmental assessment. Once that is done, and if it is approved, we will put out a new bid for, or put out an RFP for bids and try to get a variety of different companies to start utilizing the woods, be it small mills, it could be for biomass, hardwoods. We're going to open it up to a number of different possibilities and see what the market would like.
Thank you. I understand the project, and I understand as well up in the Waiakea, Upper Waiakea is one of the best hardwoods I understand on our state lands. But knowing this has been an ongoing project for you folks, but I think the end result is in your bids, and hope you're successful, but I think it's where you put it. And I think if you've been there long enough, they've always talked about the O'Okala and Hamakua in the district. And so, you know, that's been a real thorn, I understand. But I'd like to hopefully see that the state, that you all do a good job with it, because as we know, as I mentioned, you know, one of the best hardwoods come from that region. But I think it's where the mill is going to be, which is a really sticking point. As we all know throughout the state, whenever you put up developments, it's a NIMBY situation. So
yes,
just keep me posted.
Just to clarify, the state isn't milling any of its woods off of its lands. It's
Right,
putting out
right.
bids for companies, small companies,
Right.
to do the milling for them. So the mill you're referring to is privately owned.
Right.
The state has no involvement
They
in it.
probably would be one of the bidders as well.
They more than likely will bid on some of the...
Yeah. On the same note, though, when I talked about location, with the state, because you own many of the lands up on that upper region, wouldn't it make more sense, though, for you to lease a portion of the lands if there's available, because it's away from communities and away from everybody? Put it on site?
Well, as far as the timber production goes, we can only harvest timber on lands that have been designated as a timber management area. So to do that, you have to go through the environmental process. You have to write a management plan that's approved by the Board of Land and Natural Resources, and then it becomes a timber management area from which you're able to put out an RFP to license someone to come in and harvest the wood. So we only have 2 of those in the state right now, and yes, we're interested in establishing more of those, and some of the Hamakua areas could definitely be some of those areas.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you, Chair.
Members, questions? Representative Jordan?
Going back to the, I guess the whale co-managers for the sanctuary, just a comment. I mean, where are we at with the Fisheries Management Council versus NOAA versus the expansion of the whale sanctuary area? And where are our comments regarding us as a state? And are we working with our congressional delegation to make sure we can get those fundings? Because I, too, have attended many of those meetings, and the consensus of the community is not to expand the sanctuary.
Hi, Aaliyah Herman again, State Co-Manager of the Sanctuary. Can you repeat the beginning of your question? I apologize.
Well, I mean, there's different groups out there. There's the Fishery Management Council, there's NOAA, there's the basic community, and there's been discussion about enlarging our whale sanctuary when that population is already recovered, you know, and now it's going to start impeding more costs on our state for something that another government is imposing upon us to continue to do. So what has your actions been with our congressional delegation to help keep that funding here?
Right. Thanks for the question. You know, I think as Representative Tokioka pointed out, there's a lot of different moving parts when it comes to NOAA, and they, even though it's all NOAA, they actually all kind of run in their own lane a bit. So certain things, you know, Fisheries Management Council, they advise on fisheries management. NOAA Fisheries does the protected species work. So a lot of the things you see around monk seals or sea turtles or false killer whales. Sanctuary is unique, which is also part of NOAA because of the co-management relationship and because it is the one part that has a lot more flexibility. So, you know, the humpback whales are doing very well right now. NOAA Fisheries, that one lane, is evaluating whether or not they're considered recovered under the Endangered Species Act. So whether or not our population of humpback whales here should be delisted. They haven't come out with that yet. Separate, the sanctuary exists with or without that. That was established by Congress in 1992. And when Congress established it, they gave the sanctuary the authority. They said, manage humpback whales in their habitat, and in the future, you may consider adding other resources of national significance. So that was in the enabling legislation established by Congress. About 4 years ago, the sanctuary, together, NOAA and the state, started that process of what should the sanctuary be in the future? Should it continue to be just whales, or should it be something different? And that's been this 4-year, public, lots of negotiations, that kind of process. And now, for a variety of reasons, NOAA is going to come out with a proposal. It's not going to be joint. It's going to be a NOAA proposal, which gives the state more opportunity to hear what the public has to say, to do a real evaluation of the significance of what NOAA is proposing, both in terms of how it might, in terms of the regulations, in terms of states' rights and state sovereignty issues, in terms of how it might help and support what we're doing. So from both sides, how could it help? How could it hurt? And then at the end of the day, again, the governor gets to make that decision. It's not being forced upon us. It's only going to exist if we choose it. It's only going to change if we choose that. So that's the position we're in right now, is we're continuing to have these discussions, continuing to talk closely with communities to figure out what should the sanctuary be and make that decision. So that in the end is on us. It's not up to NOAA. In terms of the congressional delegation, they're certainly aware of all of these issues. We've talked to them a bit about funding. Speaking for myself, I know that's something I need to do more of. The way the funding comes through is it comes from Congress to NOAA, or to the Department of Commerce, then to NOAA, then to the National Ocean Service, then to the Office of National Marine Sanctuaries. And the head of that office makes the decision about how the money is allocated. So there's a lot that happens between Congress and us at the state finally getting our share. That being said, I think we do need to do better at making sure that our representatives on the federal level are really engaged on this and helping ensure that we get funding to the state. All that being said, I would still say from a state position, even if we had federal funding, at this point, it behooves us to, at a minimum, fund our own co-managers, because these are our positions representing our state interests. So I know that was a lot of moving parts, and I'm happy to talk through it again, in more detail, but I hope that gets at least somewhat at your question.
It does, and I have a comment, and I'll keep it to myself for right now. But
I'd be very happy to talk with you further. But again, the state is very invested in making sure we're making the right decision, and so we've been in constant discussion and negotiations with NOAA, have pushed back in a lot of places, have worked to bring forward community interests, and also make sure that what goes forward, even though it's still going to change, we still have a lot of questions, is as reasonable at this point as possible. And those discussions are ongoing, and what the community has to say is going to be paramount to how this all plays out in the end.
Okay. Thank you. Oh, thank you. For Cardi, I know you spoke a little bit about the SLIMS project. Are we going to be able to see that by 2015, or is it going to be by 2016? We're going to have that inventory of the public lands.
Okay. Russell, you schedule? You have a schedule? SLIMS. Yeah, Russell's administering that program, so I'm gonna. He knows the schedule better than I do, so can you give him an update on anticipated schedule?
I'm sorry, what was the question? The schedule on the SLIMS upgrade?
Yeah, it's been since 2011 that we've been working on this. When are we going to be able to use that program, the SLIMS program?
Okay, there's the SLIMS
the old
upgrade
version.
was an appropriation last year, I believe, out of our special fund revenues, our special fund money. I don't recall an appropriation or anything related to SLIMS in 2011.
Well, 2011 was the request for the inventory.
You may
Wasn't
be
SLIMS
referring to the Act 54
Yeah.
system. That is going to be operational in January of 2015. There's a report to the ledge that we...
I was reading it.
Yes.
So it's January. Is it operational?
It will be towards the end of the month. Yes. It's going to be open. That one is initially going to be started with the agencies has been uploading the information, a lot of the information that we have contained on there. For example, if you pop open and you basically see a big screen with maps of the various islands. You can hit the island of Oahu. You can hit, and if you know where Honolulu International is, you can scroll down and tab there and hit some detail to get information on the leases and who the tenants are, how much they're paying rent.
Is it going to be 100% operational, or are we still uploading?
It's pretty much operational.
Yeah.
This is Derek Rabillar's
State Lands Information Systems Manager. Right now, we met with over 40 agencies. We've determined that there are approximately 35 agencies that have needed to submit data for this system, both parcels and encumbrances. We have, as of last week, Friday, we have received data from all of those agencies. So the data will be live when we go into production at the end of the month.
So we'll have 100% reporting by the end of the month. We can click on there and find all our public trust lands, what the revenues are, if they're leased or not leased, right?
Correct.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Sorry, one more thing to point out. The system will be as accurate as the source data that is submitted, yeah.
So if they find inaccuracies, how does that get
If there are inaccuracies, our instruction is to contact the source agencies. And the source agencies are listed within the application itself.
Okay. Thank you very much, Chair.
Representative Onishi?
Hi. And sorry I was a little bit late. I had a question in regards to the HIS program and the funding and determination of how the requests for funding come about with the various agencies being involved. And I know DLNR and HDOA are the lead agencies. But can you kind of give us an idea as to how the request is, or how the funding request is determined and generated, and I guess, yeah, that basically first.
Ms. Randy Bartlett, he's on the Hawaii Invasive Species Council, can answer that.
Good afternoon, Chair and committee members. Rep. Onishi. Randy Bartlett, the coordinator for the Hawaii Invasive Species Council. As far as the request went, it was originally, we got 5.75 last year over both bienniums, 5 million last year, and then 750 from the previous. So we had originally recommended to bump it up to even it out to 6, but when it went through budget and finance, it got dropped down to 4. So that's where we are.
So regarding the $6 million request, that was just a pull out of the air, round up to the next $1 million level kind of decision?
Kind of. To tell you the truth, I mean, the LNR report from 13 years ago says we needed 50 million. So if we're getting 5, that's a tenth of what the need is projected to be. So I figured anything more than that, it's going to be used. The need is there.
Okay. In regards to now the actual funding, and as you know, I sat in on a lot of the meetings and decision-making process. For me, from the standpoint of the expenditure of the funds, realizing that most of the work is being either done through the university or through the island county committees, the overall plan on addressing a particular invasive species in the state of Hawaii, and fire ants, for example. There seems to be no statewide coordinated effort in terms of addressing the little fire ant issue and what to do about the islands that don't have it, or doing surveys, or to determine. It's almost like a accidental matter of fact. Oh wow, we got little fire ant here now, and by doing the survey, oh, they must have been here for over a decade, or maybe 5 years or whatever. So who would be responsible for really looking at a statewide plan on addressing some of these issues so that we can get a better handle on whether it's going to be control only, whether it's going to be eradication, whether it's prevention for spread. In the meetings, I didn't really see that, laid out for people to look at and say, okay, these are the projects really that have the highest priority.
Mm-hmm. The way, I guess, the best way for me to respond to that would be, as far as the council is concerned, the council would let the departments take the lead. For instance, for little fire ants, it would be Department of Agriculture, because that's kind of their kuleana to take care of something like that, or coconut rhinoceros beetle. So it's up to the departments to put those plans together, what their response is going to be, and then request the funding, and then and bring it to the council to ask for support if there's going to be expenditures for whatever funds that the council gets from the legislature to help them respond to that, each of those problems depending on the species.
Yeah, and I realize we set priorities as a group, but they don't seem to be really focused, to address. I guess that's just my comment. Okay. Thank you, Chairs.
Thank you.
Thank you. Questions, members?
Can I make just a clarification to a statement that Randy made about the $4 million reduction from $6 million? Currently in the budget that was submitted does not include any funds for invasive species control. We are currently in discussion with the governor to see what level would be needed and what level would be submitted, if at all, through a governor's message.
Okay, thank you. Representative Tokioka?
Thank you, Chair. Cardi, can you bring up historic preservation, please?
Sure.
You know what? I'll ask you the question. Okay. You can decide whether you want to bring him up. Many of the building trades are having issues with the historic preservation or the definition of historic preservation. I had the opportunity to work with an uncle who's 80 years old, and he wanted to get a new roof on a house because the roof was falling in, and I had to go through this because the house was 60 years old for him. It's ridiculous. And I know that many people in this building have been trying to work on that. Other than the specific legislation, and according to some of the people at planning and in the Historic Preservation Office, it's not that hard of a thing to fix, and it doesn't really need to be fixed through HRS, is my understanding. So I'm sure you're aware of the issue and the concern. What can we do to fix this issue? Because if it's a matter of a position or whatever it is, but it's affecting the general community, and there's so many homes that are coming up on this 50-year designation of the historic meaning. What is the answer from Historic Preservation and your department?
Yes, we were just talking about this morning. Alan, you want to comment on that?
And the presentation this morning at BIA talked about Honolulu, but it's all over the state. Everybody has buildings that this law is creating havoc on. So can you folks help explain that to us?
Sure. Alan Downer, SHPD. The first thing, we have got a draft of a policy statement that we're going to distribute to the counties. We've looked at the reviews we've done over the last 2 or 3 years and identified certain types of projects which always result in a finding of no historic property affected, which means they can just go forward. And we're about to distribute that list to the counties and tell them, listen, use this list if a project is, you're talking about, if re-roofing a building, we don't need to see that. It's not going to affect the historic property. And that will reduce by about 30% the number of reviews that we see. I mean, last year we reviewed just under 3,700 projects on residences that meet the 50-year definition of historic property. So we think that's going to have a significant effect on how rapidly these things get reviewed. Right now, the average review time is 5 days. The median.
On whose side? The city side or your side?
On our side. I have no idea. I mean, we don't know anything until the city says you need a permit. It has to go to SHPD. I have no idea how long it takes on their side.
Okay.
But from the time
so they're saying the same thing. They're saying it's quick on their side until it gets to the state.
Well, like I say, I don't know how long it takes. I can tell you that when this has been, I've been there for 13 months. And this was one of the things that, the day I walked through the door, this was a complaint I heard. So, and when I got there, the average review time was 17 days. And that is, from the time it gets to us, it's 17 days. It's down to 5 now, and the median is 3 days. So I have noticed going through our intake logs, and we log every document that comes into the office, that very often permits are dated at for example, in Honolulu, they're dated on an average 2 to 3 months before we see them. Now, what happens in that time, I have no idea. It was something that I only became aware of. But anyway, what we can do in the short run is get this list distributed, get to the counties, get the counties to implement it, and reduce those reviews. So that, we see, honestly, there are projects we see every day which we look at and go, why is this coming to us? They're coming to us right now because the legislature has defined a historic property as anything 50 years or older.
Right.
And so, the counties look at it. They've got a home that's 50 years old. They say, this meets the definition of historic property. It has to be reviewed by SHPD.
Yeah, and that process, if you're going to give them the list, that would help them. But they say the same thing, that when they send it to you folks, and then somebody in the office says, oh, well, we need to look at this, and they kick it back, and it goes back and forth. But the problem is the people who want these permits to fix a bathroom or the roof, they're going through some tedious, lengthy permitting process. And I represent the state and a district on Kauai, so I'm going to defend the state, but they're telling me a lot of the holdup is in the State Historic Preservation Office. And so if that's something that, you guys are going to address through a new list, then great. I think between the two departments, yours and permitting and planning, and all the counties need to sit down and hash this thing out because it's creating a lot of problems for a lot of people throughout the state of Hawaii.
Yeah. Well, we're aware of it. We're working on it. And we're doing what we can, and we're doing our best to do it administratively rather than going to the legislature to get amendments to the act. Because but there's only so far we can go. I mean, there are some things we can do administratively where I think it's clear that we have the authority to do things. There are other things where we're getting into a gray area, and whether or not we can convince the Attorney General's office that we have the authority to do those things remains to be seen.
And Alan, you're fairly new at that position, right?
13 months.
Okay. Yeah, so somebody prior to that was considered the tie-up in that office. And I'll just be blunt with everybody because everybody's heard it, I'm sure.
Yeah, so. I can't speak to what occurred before December of 2013.
Okay. I thought I'd just share. Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Representative Onishi?
Alan, if you could come back. I had a follow-up question to that. So on a private residence, who makes that determination as to whether or not it is a historic residence or building?
Could you clarify that a little bit? I mean,
okay, on a private residence that, say, is over 50 years old, who makes that determination on whether or not that building is historic or not?
Well, legally, the legislature has made that determination for us. The legislature defines a historic property as a building that is over 50 years old. And so, when, for example, in the case of a permit, when the county is aware that a building is 50 years old, that decision has already been made. And the only question is whether or not that project will affect the historic character of it. And that's a decision we make.
Okay, so in your mind, on a private residence, if we wanted to exempt private residence or have put the onus on the owner to determine if they want that building to be considered historic or meet historic requirements, we would have to change the law.
If you want to change the definition of historic property, then only the legislature can do that. And we proposed last year to change the definition to use the Hawaii Register of Historic Places as a standard. That solves the problem of the definition, but then the problem for the counties is when they get a permit for a historic home, they have to then apply that criteria themselves, and there's some question, at least in Honolulu, whether or not they have existing expertise to do that. Maui and Hawaii both, the County of Hawaii both do. Kauai does now, they didn't at the time, have staff people who are capable to make that decision if you use the Hawaii Register as a standard. But that would require amendment to the Act.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you. Members, questions? Oh, go ahead, Representative.
I read, recently about litigation regarding the aerial hunting issue, particularly on the Big Island. Can you give us an update on that?
Randy, you wanna, or Emma?
Aloha, I'm Emma Ewan with Division of Forestry and Wildlife. What occurred in the litigation was previously the County of Hawaii passed a ban saying that no one shall engage in aerial hunting, and the state should not engage in aerial hunting on the Big Island of Hawaii. And there is currently a statute, HRS 263, the Uniform Aeronautics Act, which also states that the state that no aerial shooting shall occur. And so last year, the state we have been having a Palila critical habitat order from the federal government to clear out all the hoofed animals, the sheep, in Palila critical habitat by aerial shooting methods. And so that court order was then brought to this judge in federal court to see whether the ban from the state, from the county, was superseded by federal action, and the court indicated that it was. However, in our efforts to control hoofed animals outside of Palila critical habitat, we sought on the Big Island to have the county and state law be determined upon by the federal judge or by the circuit court judge, whether those are applicable to the state. So we know that our state employees who have been doing aerial shooting for many decades would be protected and safe from prosecution due to this new threat with the county aerial hunting ban. And that judge then determined that it was out of his jurisdiction to make that determination prior to some sort of legal action being, or prosecution. He couldn't make a declaratory action. He said he didn't have jurisdiction. This isn't how the media portrayed it. The media portrayed it completely differently, but the written order that the judge and that our attorneys are drafting now is basically that the judge simply does not have jurisdiction to make that case. However, it leaves a difficulty with our state efforts to continue to make sure that we have all the tools for aerial hunting, and also enable us to continue our mandates to protect native ecosystems and watersheds and critical habitat, which is absolutely impossible without the ability to go and use helicopter-assisted aerial shooting, because some of these areas are absolutely impossible. They're too steep, too rugged, too difficult to get to just on the ground, and it would be an impossible safety hazard for our own staff to be able to control hoofed animals in those areas.
Do you foresee similar litigation to the type that required aerial shooting in the Palila habitat outside of the Palila habitat?
That is a potential. I mean, basically, the plaintiffs determine or allege that the state wasn't doing enough to protect the Palila bird, and federal action was mandated upon the state to have a plan and then implement a plan to protect the endangered species from extinction. And very similar activities or similar situations occur for the over 400 endangered species in Hawaii, which are largely threatened by hoofed animals.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Members, questions? Oh. Representative Kobayashi?
Hello. Thank you, Chair. I'm looking at Table 4, titled Budget Decisions. It looks like you're asking for $13 million more in special funds, and a large bulk of that comes from about 6 or so items that are 7 digits or more. Looks like all of the items, all of the 6 or so items are $1 million plus, but there's one that is $3.9 million increase for the NARS special fund. Now, do all of these special funds have a revenue stream that will make that will keep these funds sustainable if these ceiling increases are granted?
There's some that do have revenue streams, and that particular one is the NARS, and that one does receive money from the conveyance tax. And Randy,
No. Is it sustainable? We know about that.
Aloha, Randy Kennedy, Acting Administrator of Division of Forestry and Wildlife. We feel that it is sustainable at that level. The trend for the conveyance tax has gone up. Last year it was pretty significant, the increase, and so far this year it is holding pretty true to the revenues from last year. So in talking to our friends in the real estate community, they feel that this trend is going to continue for another year or two. So sustainable for 2 to 4 years, I would say yes. For that particular fund, the Natural Area Reserve Fund.
But wasn't your part of this money for the 10-year watershed program? Is it sustainable for that length?
Again, that is a harder question because real estate does go up and down, but historically it has trended up in that direction. But again, the way it's historically worked, we drop our spending cap when the revenues stream is down, and in those cases, basically we just tighten our belts and do with what we have.
What about the other 5 funds? Are they sustainable with an extra $1 million plus per year?
The Land Conservation Fund gets his revenues from the conveyance tax too. The other ones, I'm not so sure.
the ones that you're referring to are the ones that are requesting for $1 million increase or more?
State parks, $1 million. Slims, $1 million. I don't know what else.
Yeah, Dan Quinn, you want to talk about state parks special fund?
I mean, wait, somebody did look up the income stream, the revenue stream, and did they determine these increases are sustainable, or are you just not sure?
Afternoon, Dan Quinn with the Division of State Parks. I can speak for the State Parks Special Fund. Yes, it is. We carried over a balance in excess of $1 million into this year, and our revenue stream continues to increase from various sources. What we're asking for is the ability to spend the money we have in hand now invested in the parks, as well as in the upcoming years.
Okay, thank you.
I think to answer your question in general, if we're requesting for an increase, we believe it's sustainable. There's a source of revenue that comes in for the land, special land maintenance funds through our issuance of leases and collecting of rent and so forth. So in general statements, yes, these funds that are requesting for increase are sustainable.
Thank you.
Thank you. Representative Onishi.
Hey, I have a follow-up question to his questions I asked. Okay, so if there hasn't been any funding in the current proposal from the governor's budget, so, and you're having discussions with the governor, what is the department asking for? Are you asking for the $6 million?
Well, we brought it to attention. I think they're looking holistically at all our requests, and I think we need to wait at least a week or so before he looks at our entire budget and determines what is being asked. You folks understand that in the original ask it was 6. We went through this iteration about looking at what was really in the current ask, what was submitted, and what our current needs are. And it hasn't been determined what level of funding is going to be allowed by the current governor.
Okay, but you're looking at your department's current needs, but not specifically the HIS needs. I mean...
Well, I think the original HIS request was, as noted in Table 4, was $6 million.
Right.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So, okay.
But there's other requests that are important to the department as well. including the HISC request for $6 million. So we have to look at it holistically, and that is all under review by the governor at this point. So I think in a week or so, we will know what requests that are originally asked by the department will come down through our governor's message.
Okay, but the department's position is that they would like to have $6 million.
Currently, yes, that was our original ask.
Okay, thank you. I had another question regarding the federal court order regarding the Palila habitat, and I wanted clarification as to whether that court order specifically required the state to do aerial shooting to control the ungulates.
Okay.
Or is this a part of the department's plan on how they would address the eradication of ungulates in those areas?
I'm checking. I don't have the answer, I'll be honest with you, but do you have it, or you want to get back with them?
Yes, it does, and we can get
Randy.
Randy Kenny again. I've been involved in this issue for quite a few years, and we can get you a copy of the court order. So it's specific, but the answer to your question is yes, that it specifically indicates that we need to use all methods possible, including aerial shooting, to eliminate the animals.
Okay, but it doesn't mandate you using aerial shooting. It says that's one of the methods. Am I correct?
It mandates us to remove the animals.
It mandates you to remove the animals, but does it specifically say you have to remove the animals by doing aerial shooting?
I believe so, but on a functional basis, that is the only functional way that it can be done.
That is the only functional way?
Well, the way that the federal court order is worded is based on a plan that the department did, and the federal agencies and federal judge approved. And basically, it says that the state will do, I believe, quarterly aerial sightings of the entire mountain in Palila critical habitat. And if animals are seen, they will be dispatched by helicopter when they are seen by these helicopter sightings. So it does mandate that aerial shooting occurs in Palila critical habitat.
Okay, so you're saying that the judge's court order specifically says that
yes,
the only way, if you sight them by air, you have to eliminate them by air.
Yes.
But there are other methods you could employ to try to get rid of the ungulates before having to shoot them.
The state has allowed public hunting in the area for many decades without any bag limits and restrictions of that sort. And also there has been, and potentially John, who's a little bit more familiar with the actual on-the-ground management, can answer to that. But again, the federal agencies have determined, and the federal court has determined, that aerial shooting is absolutely necessary to fulfill this plan, and so that is what we have been mandated to do, and there's no weaseling around about that. It's what we've been told.
Okay, and I had a follow-up question. So in these areas, do you currently allow hunting?
Yes.
And how often?
There's no restriction. I believe it's every single day. No bag limits. Hunters have been able to go up and take as many animals as they want for decades. So.
In a designated Palila protected habitats?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Members, questions? Maybe a quick follow-up question. I noticed on the unauthorized positions, you had a cultural resource manager position that you're funding through the Special Land and Development Fund.
Correct.
Is this what in particular is this position? Is this related to the World Conservation Congress? I know we allocated quite a bit of resources through this fund to DLNR last year. Is that what the position was created for? in LNR 101 specifically?
No, it was not. This position is
because it's funded specifically through the Special Land and Development Fund,
that's
right?
the source of funding, LNR 101, but
So
the
what is
position is used to help the department as well as Department of Transportation navigate through the 6E process. So it's an advisor to the department to help the department, who has to also satisfy the requirements of 6E, understand the process, and when we do submit our plans and projects through State Historic Preservation, this is an advisor to both Department of Transportation as well as DLNR.
So it has to navigate through one of your divisions, SHPD. You have a person located in the chair's office.
Right.
Okay, so you created this particular position. Okay.
And I think initially it was to help with the rail project as well, but there's been a lot of Department of Transportation projects as well as DLNR projects that have difficulty understanding the requirements of 6E. So this position is important because it really facilitates the understanding of the process and helping us and Department of Transportation ensure that our projects are prepared to go to SHPD.
Okay. Okay. I'll ask follow-up questions later on that one. Members, any other questions? Okay, go ahead.
You mentioned you're still going through the decision-making process on the asks. So I can't ask you how much money you're going to ask for Kirk, but how much money? When will Kirk have to start laying people off? When will the boats stop running?
Okay, Mike, now PE is Executive Director. He can answer that.
Hello, members. Mike Nahol, PE from the Kaho'olawe Island Reserve Commission. The question is, if we don't get any funding, when will we have to start laying people off? Is that correct?
Well, we don't know how much you're going to request. So without asking you how much you need, I don't know what to ask.
Can I see it? I know how much it is. Yeah, I know how much.
Yeah, I think in our ask we identified the positions.
Yes.
You can talk about what
I can talk about, okay. Yeah, so we're asking for 2.77 million for the first year and 2.78 for the second year. That includes 19 positions that are 18 warm bodies today, and then that would we would like to add one or two more in the following year. That is split between the total request is split between personnel, which is about slightly under 1 million, and the other 1.5 million would be operational infrastructure expenses to maintain allow volunteers to continue to work on Kaho'olawe, to maintain the base camp on the island, our facilities on both Maui and Kaho'olawe, and the emergency infrastructure that we have that facilitates both places.
Oh, so what you're talking about is already in the testimony. I just missed it.
It's in table 4.
Okay.
The reason why it's not in our testimony is because that wasn't included in the budget that was submitted, but it is part of our original departmental ask.
Okay.
So it's on table 4.
Pardon my sarcasm. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, Chair.
Okay. Members, questions? Oh, Senator Inouye.
Thank you. I noticed in the on your budget on the active federal awards on table 11, and we're looking at LNR 810 with regards to the FEMA accounts. And I noticed that the Department of Homeland Security, I guess the federal awards to Hawaii, you still had monies from the October 2006 earthquake, and you got 2007 storms, 08 storms, and the March 2011 tsunami, and the 2012 storms. So are those monies in your coffers, and why aren't it being spent? Or are we waiting for some contribution from the state to, I understand some may be on projects or ongoing, and does that have anything to do with like the improvements to Hilo Pier and some of the harbors? Please explain. That's quite a bit of money there.
I think this is more, I'm just going to consult with fiscal as far as the reporting of this. Okay, we got to get back with you because these are money that comes from the FEMA through state civil defense.
Right.
And we apply for that. But as far as the accounting purposes, a lot of it has been spent already toward projects. I don't have the list of projects whether
Okay, if
Hilo
you
Pier is
can
included.
give some synopsis to the chairs of the committee, they'll forward to us. Thank you.
So as far as
I'm wondering just why it's still active there.
Okay.
And
then
if
some of
there's
the
any more
projects.
disbursements that needs to go to the counties wherever the projects
Got it.
were.
Okay, thank you for the question.
Thank you.
Members, questions? Go ahead, Representative. And Representative Kobayashi after.
Aloha, Acting Chair. Thank you, Chair. Just a question. I noticed LNR 806, Malaikahana State Recreation Area. Any kind of update on that?
Yes, Dan Quinn can give you an update.
Good afternoon. Dan Quinn again. I think you may be asking about the current effort at the Kahuku section of the park. The former tenant is just about completely cleaned out. We have removed all of the old structures that are going to be removed. I believe we said one of those that was usable for management purposes. We are engaging an arborist to assess the trees that are there, and we're going to be going through the park and removing hazardous trees and pruning the other ones. So the new manager of the area is already approved for a lease by the board. We will be issuing permits so that person or that group can begin deploying the new little camping structures that they're bringing in as we go through and prune out the trees. So the area is closed right now, and it'll be a couple more months, at least probably 2 to 3 months before it's re-engaged with the new manager. You may have been looking at our capital appropriations, which would be other things, but currently we have funding that we're employing to do the cleanup and get that site ready.
Okay, thank you so much. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Representative Kobayashi.
This is going back to that humpback whale sanctuary. I know it's kind of a small money issue dollar-wise. What is the worst case scenario if state continues to contribute nothing? That is, this is a co-managed area, and I don't know what co-managed means. If you contribute nothing, does that mean you have no influence over the decisions, and all decisions are made by the feds unilaterally without state involvement? Or does co-manage mean that even if we contribute nothing, we still have like decision-making authority or decision-making veto?
Hi, Aaliyah Herman, State Co-Manager for the Humpback Whale Sanctuary. Thank you for the question. So, let's see. So, as we discussed previously, co-management was established through this 1998 compact agreement. whether or not that compact agreement exists through the National Marine Sanctuaries Act as well as the act that established the Humpback Whale Sanctuary, the governor always maintains his or her authority to say yes or no in state waters. So that decision is maintained. However, co-management is more, I would argue co-management is more than just a yes or no decision. There's all of the pieces along the way. There's what gets put before the governor. There's the, and that includes regulations, that includes boundaries, and that includes action. So that's the education, the restoration, the community capacity building. So, I think there are, the question of co-management is actually, I think, a pretty large philosophical question that I think a lot of people in the state are struggling with now. I know a lot of communities are talking about community co-management. We're talking about co-management between the state government and the federal government. So worst case scenario, you always have, the governor always has the ability to say yes or no. Without a state co-manager, you don't have anybody in the state whose job it is to work with our federal counterparts to ensure that the state's voice and community voices are heard as they move forward with their process. And again, that's both in terms of the actions they take with respect to management, so this restoration, education, research, also as well as what they end up proposing to the government. So certainly, I'm sure my colleagues at DLNR here and there would step up as they could, but there's nobody monitoring this, and there's nobody in a position to really make sure the governor is well informed at the end of the day. So I think there's a range of scenarios. Obviously we always do what we can with what we have, but if we do truly want to have a voice, and again, this is over, especially in the proposal that'll come out, which will include Ni'ihau and the boundaries. This is over 30% of state waters in the main Hawaiian Islands. And I don't think we want to be left in a position where we don't have a clear voice, someone whose job it is to work on these issues, to work with our federal counterparts in the management of sanctuary waters. So I don't know if that answers your question. I'm happy, a lot of, and I apologize, a lot of these are big philosophical and policy questions that are maybe better suited for smaller discussions, and I'm very interested to hear what all of you have to say as this process moves forward, because I'm sure you will be hearing from your constituents, and that's that's very important. And so I certainly, as this process moves forward, I want to make sure that we're all in communication regularly, and that I can answer any questions with respect to what's proposed and what's true and what's not true, and what's really in there and what's not really in there, and what we need to look at more closely. And there's details I can discuss about that in further detail now, and especially once the draft proposal comes out. But
okay, the whale sanctuary includes state waters and non-state waters.
Correct.
The governor retains authority within state waters no matter what we contribute, even if we contribute nothing. It's unclear as to whether the governor retains authority in non-state waters if the state contributes nothing.
Yes, though to clarify, it is a federal proposal. So NOAA is going to propose regulations in state waters. Those will then, if those move forward, if the governor accepts those will then be the law of the land. So we will have to follow those. With respect to federal waters, yes, one of the things co-management does is it gives us a voice in the management of waters outside of 3 miles. So currently that's Penguin Bank off of West Molokai and the waters in the Ao Channel.
So does the governor retain authority outside of state waters if the state contributes nothing?
I would say practically no. I don't think we're going to be part of those discussions. No.
Okay.
I would say no.
Thank you.
Thank you. Members, questions? Representative Jordan?
I just have a comment. Cardi, I'd like to thank you, and I'd like to thank the former director for the extra effort that you did up at Palihua in the largest fire in the state of Hawaii's history, and the money that you expensed out of your budget. And I haven't seen you come in here and ask to have that money replaced. So I appreciate what you did for that particular area up there and the protection of our areas, including our forestry. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Members, any other questions? Okay, if not, thank you very much.
Thank you.
We'll give DLNR a second to clear out.